For most of us, death is an intruder. It's this thief that comes in the night. But for one of the greatest writers in history, it was something else entirely. It was a companion, an obsession, and it was the dark muse that would make him immortal. So let's dive into the haunting world of Edgar Allan Poe.
I mean, just listen to those lines. They're some of the most famous in all of American literature, just dripping with a love so powerful it literally spits in the face of death. This was the world Poe lived in, a place where beauty and tragedy were locked in this permanent, desperate dance.
And that's really the question at the heart of Poe's entire story. His whole life was like one long conversation with death, a shadow he didn't just run from, but actually chased, trying to figure out its secrets.
So you probably know the name, right? The guy who wrote all those terrifying Gothic tales, the one who basically invented the detective story. But to really get his work, you have to understand the mind that created it. And that was a mind shaped by a uniquely intimate and frankly disturbing relationship with mortality. All right, so to unravel the mystery of Edgar Allan Poe, we have to go back, way back, to the very beginning. Because his story isn't just about some writer. It's about a little boy who was forged in the fires of one tragedy after another.
The losses came so hard and so fast. I mean, before he was even old enough to really form memories, his whole world was just shattered. At age 1, his father just up and vanished. By 3, his mother was dead from tuberculosis. And then, bam, he was torn away from his brother and sister, all of them sent to live with different families. He ends up in the home of John Allan, a guy with a ton of money but not a lot of warmth. And here's the crucial part. He was never formally adopted. That name, Allan, was like a suit he was allowed to wear, but it was never truly his. His place in that family was always, always conditional.
And this right here, this set up the central conflict of his entire youth. John Allan wanted an heir for his business, someone who cared about profits and ledgers. But Poe? He was obsessed with poetry, with art, with the worlds he could build just using words. It was a total clash between commerce and creativity, right from the very start.
The real breaking point came when Allan sent him off to university. But get this, he gave him less than a third of the money he actually needed. It's almost like he was setting him up to fail. So Poe, being desperate, starts gambling to cover his costs, racks up huge debts, and the fight with Allan that followed was, it was explosive. That was the final straw. Poe was completely on his own. So he's cut off, totally alone, and now Poe has to build a life from scratch. This next chapter is where we see him trying to find his footing, not as the son of some rich merchant, but as a man defined purely by his own ambition. And his path was, let's just say, unconventional. He joins the army under a fake name, and surprise, he's actually amazing at it. He thrived in that structure, rising all the way to sergeant major. He even got into the super prestigious West Point Military Academy. But the ghost of John Allan came back one last time, cut off his funding again, and forced Poe out for good. It's here that he finally finds the one thing he'd been missing his whole life, a real home. He moves in with his aunt, Maria Clem, in Baltimore. Now, they were dirt poor, the house was cramped, but it was filled with genuine love, something John Allan's huge mansion never had. But as always in Poe's life, death was just around the corner. His foster mother passed away. She was really the only bit of warmth in the Allan house. And then his brother died too. And this is when his writing begins to totally transform. He ditches the youthful poetry and starts digging into the darkest corners of our minds: guilt, obsession, and that slow, creeping madness. This period leads us to the one relationship that would define absolutely everything about his life and his work. It's here that the shadow he'd been chasing his whole life finally turned around and started chasing him back. So, in 1836, he marries his young cousin, Virginia, and she became his anchor and the constant storm of his life, a life filled with poverty, struggles with alcohol, and constant professional rejection. She was his muse, and she was the one person who could quiet his spiraling mind. But joy in Poe's world was a fragile thing. One day, while she was singing, she coughed, and a single bright drop of blood appeared on her lips. It was tuberculosis, the exact same disease that took his mother, his foster mother, and his brother, had now come for the only light he had left in the world. This slow, agonizing 5 years of her illness, That became the fire where his greatest art was forged. The absolute terror of watching her fade day by day poured directly onto the page. This is when he wrote his most claustrophobic, most psychologically terrifying masterpieces. And then came The Raven. You know, for his readers, it was this gothic marvel. But for Poe, it was the simple truth. The Raven's single, crushing word wasn't a story. It was a verdict on his life. It was the finality of loss made real. When Virginia finally died in 1847, something inside Poe just broke for good. The man who had written about death his entire life was now completely consumed by it. The shadow he had danced with for so long, it finally just swallowed him whole. Poe's own end was shrouded in a mystery he probably would have appreciated. But while his life was cut tragically short, his words were just beginning their journey into a dark and immortal legacy. After Virginia's death, Poe just spiraled. 2 years later, he disappeared for several days before being found delirious in Baltimore, wearing someone else's clothes. He died 4 days later in the hospital, and to this day, nobody really knows what killed him. And this is his true impact. See, Poe didn't just write stories. He literally provided the blueprint for entire genres. He dragged horror out of old castles and graveyards and put it right inside the human mind. Modern horror, the detective novel, the psychological thriller, they all stand on the foundation that he built. Another master of the macabre, H.P. Lovecraft, put it perfectly. He said Poe wasn't just a writer in the genre, he was its deity, the god of the Gothic. But maybe his greatest gift wasn't just fear. It was showing us the profound, aching beauty inside that fear. He taught us that the pain of death is the ultimate proof of life's value. The grief hurts so much, only because the love was so real.
And that kind of leaves us with one final thought. Maybe Poe's genius wasn't in mastering the macabre at all, but in holding up the darkness just to make us appreciate the light, reminding us that the deepest horror is also a testament to the deepest love.